In 1985, the Navy told us we were retrieving a Soviet sub lost to pressure collapse. They didn't mention the hull was welded shut from the inside, or that when we cut it open, the welds hissed like breathing lungs. Inside were tanks, 6 of them, 5 shattered, 1 still alive, and carved across the metal in Russian letters half melted by heat were just 2 words: Ne budite, do not wake. The Bering Strait is an unforgiving place. Even in daylight, it feels like night never truly leaves, just lingers in the water, waiting. We deployed from the USS Proteus under strict radio silence. The briefing had been 2 hours of classified chatter and 1 clear instruction: no visual documentation inside the Soviet vessel. That wasn't standard procedure, and neither was the fact that the sub's coordinates had come from Moscow. Officially, it was a cooperative recovery under a scientific maritime accord. Unofficially, it was a Cold War handshake hiding something nobody wanted to own. At 0600, I checked my suit pressure while Chief Handler stood by the diving bell. He was pale, quiet, old-school Navy, spent half his life patching wrecks from Pearl Harbor to Truk Lagoon. I'd never seen him nervous. "Depth reads 340 meters, he muttered, flipping through the sonar logs. "But we've got a thermocline down there that doesn't make sense, 10 degrees colder than the surrounding column." "Thermocline?" I asked. He shook his head. "Not at this range. It's local." Then he looked at me. "Just remember, Nash, no one's down there to play hero. You find the hatch, mark it, get out." I nodded, trying not to let the unease show. We'd pulled wrecks before, but never ones that Moscow asked us not to record. The bell descended slow, the steel groaning under pressure. The deeper we dropped, the quieter the world became, until it was just the thrum of my oxygen feed and the steady rhythm of my heart. At 280 meters, I saw the first glint of metal on sonar, a faint outline like a knife blade lying in the sand. "Proteus, I've got contact. Bering 085. "Copy that, Nash. Proceed with visual." I turned my floodlight on. The beam cut through the murk, revealing the Soviet insignia scorched into the side of the hull. The metal wasn't rusted. It was burned, like it had melted and then refrozen in place. A pressure implosion couldn't do that. Something else had. As I drifted closer, I noticed a strange texture across the exterior plating, tiny grooves running in circular patterns, almost like fingerprints. I reached out, brushed a gloved hand against one. The metal pulsed. I jerked back, heart pounding. Maybe it was just my imagination. The deep does that to you, plays tricks, makes shadows breathe. But then I saw the readings on my wrist monitor flicker. Pressure spikes, temperature drops. "Nash, your vitals just jumped," came Handler's voice through the comms. "Copy, just turbulence," I lied. "Approaching entry point." The forward hatch had been sealed by 3 welded plates. One was split clean down the middle, like something had forced its way out. I marked the coordinates, started the torch, and began cutting. The sound of the arc welder was swallowed by the water, just a faint hiss, a vibration through my bones. When the last plate gave, a dark plume leaked out. Not smoke, not oil. It was thicker, heavier, like ink. Proteus, breach complete. Entering. Inside, the light hit metal walls that weren't Soviet standard. They were darker, almost organic in shape, bending and curving in ways that didn't make engineering sense. Frozen condensation covered everything. My breath fogged my visor despite full circulation. And then I saw the markings. Carved letters across the corridor walls. Russian, but not industrial. Hand-etched, desperate. Oni, ne umerli. They are not dead. I floated forward, flashlight trembling slightly in my grip. The deeper I went, the more the frost on the bulkheads looked like veins, branching, spreading outward from the direction of the main compartment. The door ahead was welded shut and then bent outward. The cutter marks were on the inside. I radioed in. Proteus, I'm at primary compartment. Structural integrity looks compromised. Copy, Nash. You've got 5 minutes left on your O2 window. Visual confirmation only. Understood. I leaned close to the breach, and my light caught something glimmering beyond. Rows of glass tanks, 6 in total, built into the walls. 5 were shattered, 1 still alive. There was movement inside. I edged closer, trying to focus through the frost-covered glass. There was liquid inside, thick, dark, moving like oil in slow motion. A shape floated within it, pale and indistinct, but every few seconds it shifted, not drifting, moving. Something in there was alive, and as I raised my light, I saw the etching burned into the tank itself, written not in paint or marker, but scorched into the metal. Ne budite, do not wake. The pressure gauge screamed, my comms filled with static, voices layered on voices, whispers that weren't English, not Russian. Then I saw my reflection in the glass, except it wasn't mine. It blinked. When the comms cleared, the voice in my ear wasn't Handler's. It was speaking Russian, and it was coming from inside my suit.
Ты слышишь? The voice slid through my earpiece, low, distorted, almost human. I froze, every muscle in my body tightening. Proteus, say again, you're breaking up. Nothing, just static. Then that same voice again, softer this time. Below. I turned, scanning the cabin. The sound wasn't coming from the comms anymore. It was coming from inside my helmet. A faint hiss of breath, not mine, echoed in the channel. My pulse spiked. I tried to steady my breathing, checked my tank pressure, normal. Suit integrity, normal. But my depth gauge had shifted. It was reading 345 meters, then 370, even though I hadn't moved. Proteus, do you copy? Request surface confirmation of depth reading? The channel hissed, and I heard a whisper layered under the static, words in Russian, overlapping, repeating the same phrase. Они ждут внизу. They wait below. My first instinct was to pull the tether and abort the dive, but when I looked back, the line that connected me to the bell was slack, drifting loosely through the corridor. Handler should have been keeping tension. I gave it a tug. It didn't respond. Another pull. Nothing. The line wasn't loose. It had been cut. I kicked off the bulkhead, Flashlight swinging across the corridor, light cutting through clouds of frozen debris. My own reflection flickered in the frost-covered panels, distorted, moving a fraction out of sync. Somewhere deeper in the wreck, metal groaned, not from pressure, from movement. A low creak rolled through the sub's spine, followed by the sound of water rushing through unseen cracks. That was impossible. The sub was sealed. At least, it should have been. I pushed forward, passing through the torn doorway into what looked like a control chamber. The glass tanks I'd seen earlier lined the walls. The fifth one, the cracked one, was empty now, its liquid pooling on the floor, faintly luminous, almost breathing with the current. The intact tank was darker. Whatever was inside had drifted to the surface, pressing faintly against the glass. For a moment I thought it was a body, human, but the proportions were wrong, too long. The face was obscured, but where the eyes should have been, faint glows pulsed beneath the skin. The voice whispered again, "You opened the door." I stumbled backward, knocking against a console. Something fell and clanged across the deck, a steel placard bolted once to the wall. The engraving was still legible under the frost. Projekt Glubina, Project Depth. Beneath it, in smaller print, Существа не из океана, мы нашли их под ним. Creatures not from the ocean, we found them beneath it. The light flickered, my helmet display glitched, sonar pings bursting across the HUD like static snow. Then, faintly, I saw a new shape below me. Not part of the sub, not geological, too symmetrical. It was buried directly beneath the Soviet hull, a second structure, perfectly circular, emitting weak electromagnetic pulses. I blinked, trying to recalibrate. The sonar couldn't have picked that up, not through ice this thick. "Below," the voice said again. "They built their ship over ours." My oxygen feed sputtered. Condensation crawled across the visor. Something was interfering with the system, a frequency I couldn't block. My ears rang with subsonic vibrations that made the teeth in my skull ache. And then, silence. When I came to, I was lying against the deck, my floodlight broken. Everything was darker now, quieter. But the tank, the intact one, was open. The glass hadn't shattered. It had peeled, like something inside had simply pushed through. Liquid pooled around my boots, viscous and cold. It shimmered faintly with its own light. And as I stepped back, I saw tracks, impressions pressed into the frost, moving toward the aft hatch. I followed, because that's what training does to you. It replaces fear with motion. The corridor curved downward into a narrow shaft where light couldn't reach. My wrist gauge flickered again. 400 meters, 425. That was impossible. I wasn't descending. But something below was rising. A metallic groan echoed through the wreck. Panels buckled. The sub shook violently, as if struck by an underwater current, except the water outside was still. My suit camera activated on auto-feed, a brief flash of infrared, and in that moment, through the distorted viewfinder, I saw them. Dozens of shapes suspended in the lower deck, faintly bioluminescent, long, thin limbs, motionless, as if waiting for a signal. They weren't bodies. They were specimens. And one by one, they turned their heads toward the light. "Proteus!" I screamed into the mic. "They're not. This isn't a sub. There's another structure below. Repeat, there's another..." Static. Then, faintly, Handler's voice. "Nash, surface team just picked up movement on sonar. Whatever's under you is opening." I looked down. The floor plates beneath my boots were glowing, faint patterns forming like circuitry. The hull was separating, petal by petal, revealing something vast beneath. It wasn't Soviet. It wasn't human. The last thing I saw before the floor gave way was a reflection in my visor, not my face, but something behind me, whispering in perfect English, "You've come to wake us." When the floor collapsed, I didn't fall, I drifted. The sensation wasn't like descending through water. It was slower, almost deliberate. The light from my broken flood lamp hung above me, suspended in blackness, while below, the rift glowed with a faint blue pulse that came and went like breathing. My descent ended gently, as if something unseen had slowed my fall. I landed on a smooth metallic surface that wasn't part of the submarine. The texture was wrong, perfectly seamless, curved like the inside of a sphere. "Proteus, I'm beneath the sub. I don't know where I am." Static again. Then a brief flicker of Handler's voice. "You're off the sonar, Nash. Depth says 450 and still dropping. Get topside, now." "I can't. There's something below. I think it's artificial." I turned slowly, scanning the curved walls. My suit light caught faint inscriptions carved into the metal. Not Russian, not any script I knew. The grooves shimmered faintly with residual heat, as if the symbols were alive. Then I saw the shapes. They weren't corpses. They weren't machines. They were both. Rows of upright forms embedded into the surface, fused seamlessly into the metal, like they'd grown from it. Some looked almost human, others didn't. Each was encased in a translucent membrane that pulsed faintly, synchronized with the light patterns under my boots. A deep hum vibrated through the chamber. It wasn't sound, it was pressure, a resonance so low it made my bones ache. I tried to step back, but my boots stuck slightly, suctioned to the floor. The hum grew stronger. The membranes began to ripple. My comm crackled violently. For a second, I heard multiple voices overlapping, English, Russian, something else entirely, all saying one word: return. The sound was layered, like a chorus played backward through static. I stumbled toward what looked like a tunnel on the far side of the chamber. As I moved, the hum pulsed faster, like a heartbeat matching mine. Inside the tunnel, the walls were slick, reflective, and covered with thin cables that pulsed faint blue light down into darkness. Every few steps, the floor vibrated with a deep thoom, like distant machinery starting up after decades of rest. Then my visor flickered. The suit camera switched to thermal automatically. And that's when I saw the truth. The walls weren't walls. They were veins. The heat signatures weren't mechanical. They were organic, flowing, branching, alive. I froze. Every survival instinct in me screamed to leave. But as I turned, the tunnel behind me had closed. The metallic membrane had sealed itself, silent and perfect. "Handler," I said, my voice trembling, "I'm trapped. This isn't a substructure. It's a containment vessel. It's growing." No response, just a faint rhythmic sound. Breathing, maybe, or the pulse of something enormous. I reached a junction where the tunnel opened into another chamber. The air, or whatever passed for it, felt thicker, charged with static. Floating at the center of the space was a sphere about 2 meters wide, suspended in midair. It rotated slowly,
made of layers of translucent material, each one containing swirling liquid light. As I approached, my suit sensors went haywire. Radiation, temperature, magnetic readings all climbing simultaneously. Then my HUD blinked and displayed a message I'd never seen before. Neural sync initiated. My vision blurred, a pressure formed behind my eyes, and suddenly, I wasn't in the chamber anymore. Flashes, memories, images not mine. A frozen wasteland, black ice for miles, towers half buried under snow, built from the same seamless metal. Men in Soviet uniforms setting charges, a woman screaming orders in Russian, "Seal it before it wakes." A blinding flash, then silence. The vision shifted again to a submerging submarine, welded hulls, containment runes scratched into the metal by hand. A final inscription, "Do not return, it remembers the light." I gasped and ripped my helmet off. The air didn't kill me, but it felt wrong, too dense, too clean. My reflection shimmered on the sphere's surface. For a split second, my face wasn't mine. My eyes glowed faintly blue, just like the things in the tanks. A voice whispered directly in my head, calm, deliberate. "You're not the first to come, but you might be the last to leave." The chamber shook violently. My helmet display blinked back on, flickering with multiple sonar pings from above. The team must have sent down another diver. But the sonar showed something else too, something massive moving beneath me, deeper in the structure. "Proteus," I yelled, "whatever's under this wreck, it's waking up." Handler's voice cut in, clearer now. "Nash, get out, now! The ice shelf is fracturing. Repeat, fracturing. We're pulling the sub-drone." Static. Then the low hum crescendoed into a roar. The membrane walls peeled open, and I saw them again, the specimens from the tanks. They were crawling from the metal, bodies folding and unfolding like origami made of muscle and bone. Their faces weren't human, but I recognized one detail. Dog tags fused into their chests. They were the crew. As I bolted toward the collapsing tunnel, one of them turned toward me, and its jaw unhinged wider than any humans could, and it spoke in a voice that wasn't sound, but memory. "You came from the same sea." I don't remember running, just the sound. The roar of the chamber was like metal being torn apart underwater, low and endless. The tunnel twisted as I stumbled forward, trying to find the same shaft I fell through. The floor rippled beneath me. It wasn't solid anymore. It moved, like muscle under skin. Every pulse of light down the corridor felt alive, each throb matching my racing heartbeat. Behind me came the wet, dragging sounds of the things that had once been the crew. Their movements were heavy but deliberate, like they were learning how to walk again after years of stillness. "Proteus, if you hear me, I need extraction coordinates, now!" Static. Then, "Copy that, Nash. Drone has you on partial visual. You're 200 feet below the wreck. What the hell is that glow?" "I don't know," I whispered, "but it's breathing." My helmet light flickered again, casting erratic flashes across the tunnel walls. Between each blink, the environment seemed to change subtly. Structures that hadn't been there before. Surfaces rearranging themselves like a living organism reconfiguring its body. The air pressure shifted suddenly, pushing me forward like an invisible current. Then I heard something else. A deep whine, mechanical, high-pitched, rhythmic, the kind of sound old sonar buoys used to make, only slower. It wasn't coming from my suit, it was coming from below. I slowed, turned the lamp downward, and froze.
Beneath the transparent section of the floor, something enormous was moving under layers of frost and metal. The shape was impossible to define, massive, coiled, segmented, stretching far beyond what any chamber should hold. The hum that filled my chest before now vibrated through my teeth. I started running again, following a faint beam of blue light ahead. An exit, maybe. But as I got closer, the tunnel walls began to melt into a silvery fluid, rippling like liquid mercury. The shapes of faces appeared within them, eyes open, lips moving silently, pressing out from beneath the surface as though trying to escape. I reached out, stupidly, and one hand grabbed mine back. It was cold, human cold. A man's face emerged, pale, terrified, mouth open in a silent scream. His dog tags clattered free from the shifting surface. Captain Volkov. He was one of the Soviet officers from the archival files I'd found earlier. The moment his hand let go, his face dissolved into the wall like it had never existed. Handler's voice came through again, distorted but urgent. "We've got seismic readings. Ice collapse in progress. Nash, your depth's decreasing. Something is pushing you up." I looked down. The metallic surface beneath me was rising, slowly but surely, like an elevator being forced toward the surface by some mechanical pulse. All around me the walls convulsed. The blue light thickened into a mist, filling the tunnel until visibility dropped to zero. And through that fog, I saw movement, something vast, coiling through the walls. When I aimed my light at it, the beam bent, distorted, reflected back on itself. For a split second, I saw what looked like an eye the size of a manhole cover staring back at me. Black, with faint rings of light swirling inside it like frozen galaxies. The hum became a voice, not human, not synthetic, but both. "We remember the warmth of your world. We remember the ones who opened the sea. You've broken the seal." Suddenly, my helmet display blinked. "Connection established. Project Frostbite." My comms flooded with data streams, lines of text flashing faster than I could read. "Containment breach acknowledged. Thermal barrier failure. Subject active." Handler's voice barely cut through the interference. "Nash, you're not on sonar anymore. What the hell is happening down there?" Before I could answer, the floor dropped again. The rising platform shattered, and I fell into another chamber. This one enormous, cathedral-sized, lined with those same glass pods. Only these weren't dormant. They were empty. Only one. At the center stood a containment tank cracked open from the inside. The liquid inside it was boiling, glowing with that same blue hue. And beside it was a figure, human-shaped, wearing a decomposed Soviet diving suit. Its helmet was missing. Its eyes glowed with faint frostlight. And when it spoke, the voice wasn't its own. It was layered with echoes of every voice I'd heard since I got here. "You shouldn't have found us, diver. We were meant to freeze forever." The tank ruptured completely. The chamber temperature dropped instantly. Ice crawled across my visor, sealing my suit joints, freezing the moisture in my breath. "Handler," I gasped, "the chamber's collapsing. Hold position, Nash. We're deploying the cable drone." "No time." The figure raised its hand, skin cracked, light spilling from every fissure. "Your warmth will join the deep." The ice around me erupted outward. For a heartbeat, I was floating, weightless, suspended in blue light,
before the entire world above me and below me fractured. When the shock wave hit, I blacked out. When I woke up, I was lying on the deck of the Proteus, surrounded by frost. The dive team stood around me, staring like they'd seen a ghost. One of them whispered, "Sir, your dive time reads 4 hours, but the log says you resurfaced 90 minutes ago." Later that night, the ship's sonar kicked up something massive, still moving under the ice, heading south. And when I checked my helmet cam, the final frame wasn't the chamber collapsing. It was me, standing inside it, still down there, eyes glowing blue.
The first thing I felt was heat. After the dive, I couldn't stop shaking for hours, but by midnight, my skin burned like I'd stood too close to a reactor vent. My veins glowed faintly blue beneath the surface, and the ship's medtechs couldn't get a proper temperature reading. They isolated me in a quarantine bay. Metal walls, one small porthole to the outside world. From there, I could see the Arctic horizon cracked open by thin lines of light. It wasn't sunrise, it was something else. An aurora forming at the wrong altitude, pulsing in rhythm with my own heartbeat. Proteus Command went silent. No one was allowed topside. The only voices over comms were Navy Intel and the Department of Energy. Every time someone mentioned Project Frostbite, the feed cut out for 10 seconds like clockwork. They thought I didn't notice. But I could hear things through the hull, sonar pings that didn't come from us. They were slower, deeper, and every time they echoed back, they came from shallower depths. Handler's voice finally returned around 0200 hours, grainy through the static. "Nash, what did you see down there?" I hesitated. "You wouldn't believe me. Try me. I think whatever they trapped in that sub wasn't human, and it's not trapped anymore." He didn't respond, but in the silence, I could hear him breathing, fast, uneven. Then a single phrase, "It's already happening." At 0245, the deck alarm went off. Sonar anomaly detected. Multiple contacts. The monitor in my isolation bay flickered to life, showing the feed from CIC. On the radar screen, 3 massive blips appeared beneath the ship, moving parallel to the seafloor. They weren't submarines. Each one was the size of a city block, and they were heading south, toward open water. The blips accelerated, then vanished. Then the lights across the ship went dark. Emergency power kicked in a few seconds later, but something had changed. The aurora outside had grown, no longer green and white, but deep electric blue, filling the sky like liquid light. My comm crackled again, but this time it wasn't Handler's voice. It was distorted, layered, like multiple voices speaking at once. Depth means nothing now. The seal is broken. The warmth must spread. Every instrument in the room started reacting. The Geiger counter, the thermal sensors, even my heart monitor. All spiked simultaneously, then flatlined. The medtech monitoring me screamed through the intercom, "What the hell? Nash, your vitals!" Then the feed cut. I ripped out my IV, stumbled to the porthole. Outside, the ocean was boiling, literally. Sheets of ice rising and cracking, water steaming into the air. The surface glowed blue like the veins under my skin. And under that light, I could see movement. Shapes. Dozens of them. At first, I thought they were whales, but their movements were too deliberate, their symmetry too perfect. They formed patterns, circles, spirals,
lines, like they were writing something across the sea. The crew flooded onto the deck, staring in silence. Some filmed, others prayed. And then one of the patterns completed itself. The water went still. The sky pulsed once, then the aurora exploded outward, sending a wave of electromagnetic interference across every system on board. The radar went white, the cameras died, but the sound went everywhere. Half the crew collapsed instantly, clutching their heads. The rest screamed, blood running from their ears and noses. I dropped to my knees, trying to block it out, but it wasn't a sound, it was a signal, a voice inside my mind. We remember the cold. Now you will too. For a moment, I wasn't on the ship anymore. I was back in the ice chamber, staring at the cracked containment tank. Only this time, the figure inside wasn't Soviet. It was me, and my reflection was smiling. When I came to, the ship was gone. I was floating on a piece of ice, miles from any visible wreckage. The aurora had vanished. Everything was silent, except for my wrist radio. It flickered once, then came to life. Broadcast in progress. Message received. Then static. Then another voice. Soft, feminine, almost human. This is NOAA Monitoring Station 14. To any surviving Navy assets, an anomalous heat signature has been detected under the Bering Strait, expanding south, requesting confirmation. Then another channel cut in. Civil news. Reports of bright blue auroras over northern Canada, Scandinavia, and Alaska. Several power grids experiencing simultaneous surges. The voice paused. Wait, receiving a transmission from orbit. Satellite feed shows light activity spreading under the polar ice cap. It's moving. Handler's voice came through last. Quiet, almost broken. Nash, whatever you found down there, it's no longer under the ice. The next morning, I was recovered by a Coast Guard cutter drifting 50 miles off course. When they pulled me aboard, their commander said something I'll never forget. We found you floating north, but every compass on that ship said north was where the heat was coming from. The Coast Guard ship that picked me up was called the Resolute. Never has a name felt more ironic. Half the crew looked terrified before I even spoke a word. They'd seen what the sky was doing. When they hauled me aboard, I was covered in frost burns that weren't cold. They glowed faintly in the dark, veins like blue filaments pulsing with light. The medics kept their distance. Every time one touched me, the ship's lights flickered. Captain Harlow came down himself, old-school officer, eyes sunken, voice steady, but he was trembling under that calm. You're the diver from the Proteus, right? The one they lost radio contact with. I nodded. He hesitated. We were told to find you. Said your biometrics might explain the signal. Signal? He led me to the bridge. Every screen was alive with static and ghost images, faint spirals of light moving under the ice. Satellite maps of the Arctic Circle glowed with expanding heat signatures. One feed caught my eye. Live imagery from a NOAA satellite. A perfect circular distortion, nearly 50 miles wide, pulsing outward like a heartbeat. It started 12 hours after your dive, Harlow said. Every ship from Alaska to the pole reports compass drift, power surges, and... He trailed off. And voices. At first I thought he was joking. Then he turned the ship's external mics to live feed. Through the static came faint murmurs, like a chorus of whispers carried on the wind, words stretched, repeated, layered on top of each other. The warmth will spread. Sleep no more. Remember the ice. I backed away from the speakers, heart pounding. "Captain," I said quietly, "those are the same words I heard inside my helmet." He frowned. "So it's not just interference." Then one of the officers shouted from the sonar console, "Sir, multiple returns, south pairing 015. The captain leaned over the display. Dozens of contacts appeared, massive, moving fast, not subs, not whales. The entire screen filled with pulsing arcs of light, all converging toward the continental shelf. Within minutes, we got confirmation over emergency frequencies, same events unfolding in Norway, Greenland, and Siberia. Every Arctic nation was scrambling jets, but anything flying over those coordinates lost navigation control within seconds. "EMP?" someone suggested. "No," I said, staring at the feed. "It's biological." Because I could feel it. The signal wasn't just sound, it was resonance. My skin vibrated with the same rhythm as the sonar pulse. I could sense their movement like echoes inside my own blood. "You're not making sense, son," Harlow said. I turned toward him, voice trembling. "They're not coming for us, Captain. They're waking up everything." Hours later, satellite imagery confirmed it. The ocean floor north of the Bering Strait had risen by nearly 40 feet. Entire ice shelves had shifted like something was pushing from below. Then came the first confirmed breach. A Norwegian reconnaissance sub sent a live transmission, barely 2 minutes long. The footage showed an undersea fissure opening along the continental ridge, releasing massive plumes of freezing vapor. Inside those plumes were shapes, hundreds, maybe thousands, ascending slowly toward the surface. The transmission ended with the sub's HAL cameras freezing mid-frame, every image overexposed by blinding blue light. The operator's last words were recorded clearly. "The ice is breathing." By dawn, the entire northern hemisphere was in chaos. Power grids flickered under magnetic disruption, GPS networks failed, satellites went dark, and everywhere, reports of the same phenomenon, glowing auroras forming in unnatural patterns, sometimes low enough to touch. I sat alone in the ship's medbay, the pulse under my skin syncing perfectly with the lights outside. The medtech tried to run blood tests, but every sample froze solid within seconds. Then my wrist radio activated on its own, a signal. Familiar coordinates. Latitude 71.35 north, longitude 179.22 west. That was the location of the Proteus wreck. "Nash," Handler's voice whispered through the static, "we found your helmet cam. There's footage you didn't record." "What footage?" "You walking out of the chamber without the suit." My chest went cold. "That's not possible." "It gets worse," he said. "We ran biometric scans. The diver in that footage is still down there, but his vitals match yours exactly." The line went dead. Outside, the horizon flickered again, streaks of blue light crawling across the sky like veins spreading through glass. The captain ordered the engines reversed, steering south, but the compasses spun uncontrollably. The ship didn't move. That's when we heard the first impact, a deep, resonant thud from below, like something massive had brushed the hull. Then another. Then the whole ship lifted a few feet, tilting sharply to port. The ocean beneath us began to glow. I rushed to the deck. The sea was boiling again, but not from heat, from movement. Beneath the waves, vast shapes twisted, spiraled, and surfaced in flashes. They weren't just creatures, they were structures, metallic, biological, impossible. The captain shouted orders. Someone screamed, and then, through the chaos, I saw it. The same symbol carved in the Soviet submarine. It was rising from the water's surface now, carved across miles of ice, a circular spiral with 3 central lines, a signal flare of impossible scale. The air filled with the hum again, so powerful it made my teeth rattle. But this time, I didn't collapse. I understood it. "The depths remember the warmth," the voice said inside me. "You carried it out." I looked at my hands. They glowed brighter than the sky. When I turned toward the horizon, I saw the first of the auroras touch the water like a curtain descending. And for a moment, I could see what lay behind it. Cities, frozen, underneath the ice, but not human ones.
Aurora didn't fade that night. It descended, not like light falling from the sky, but like a veil being lowered, slow, deliberate, enclosing the horizon. Everything under it shimmered as if viewed through glass. The sea went quiet, not calm, just hushed, like the world was holding its breath. We stood on the deck of the Resolute, bathed in the cold radiance. Every compass, every radio, every screen on board had gone black. And then, out of that silence, a voice filled the air, not through speakers or comms, but through the ship itself. Project Frostbite, Phase 1, Successful Containment. The words were clear, mechanical, and impossibly old. They repeated once, then the voice changed, fragmented, layered, human and inhuman all at once. Containment breached, host signal externalized. The captain looked at me, eyes wide. What the hell does that mean? I didn't answer. I already knew. I wasn't supposed to come back from that wreck. Whatever was in that submarine, whatever the Soviets locked inside those containment tanks, it wasn't meant to survive, and it hadn't. Not physically, but something had. Something that could move through resonance, through thought, through the living cold that bound the sea to its depths. And when I touched that glass, it moved into me. I told Harlow to turn south, to run, but it was too late. The Aurora reached the waterline, and when it did, the sea became a mirror. The reflection of the sky wasn't sky at all. It was an eye, opening slowly across the entire horizon. For the first time, I understood the Soviet warning etched into the hull. Do not break the depths. They hadn't meant the ocean. They meant the memory of it. Over the next hour, every frozen coastline reported identical events, structures of ice rising from the seabed, releasing vapor that formed shapes no human could build. The world's temperature dropped 3 degrees in 6 hours. Weather satellites called it an anomaly. I called it a return. The captain and his crew retreated below deck, trying to keep systems running, but every metal surface started to frost over from the inside. The radio operator was the first to collapse, his mouth open, eyes wide, frozen solid mid-breath. When they thawed him hours later, his lips kept moving, whispering a phrase over and over. "We are the warmth remembered." By the second day, global transmissions turned erratic. Power grids failed, air travel stopped, and an emergency broadcast echoed across every channel. One repeating message from NORAD. Operation Ice Lock. Initiate Protocol Sigma. But none of the codes matched any known system. No one could trace the signal's origin. When I heard those words, I remembered something from the files I'd found in the lab. declassified fragments of Project Frostbite. One note read, "If containment fails, allow the host signal to restabilize within human vectors. They remember warmth." It wasn't a weapon. It was a failsafe. They'd built it to store consciousness within the cold, something that could survive nuclear winter, waiting for a host warm enough to reboot it. And now it was awake in me. That night, I dreamed of the submarine again. Only this time, I wasn't outside it. I was inside it, staring at the tanks. The specimens weren't moving. They were mirroring me. Each time I took a breath, frost formed on their glass. Each time I blinked, they blinked back. And then one of them smiled. When I woke, my reflection was gone. The mirror in the medbay showed only frost where my face should be. The next morning, Captain Harlow made a decision. He locked me in the quarantine bay, not out of cruelty, but duty. He said my pulse emitted an electromagnetic field that was destabilizing the ship's hull. He was right. The walls hummed when I exhaled. The frost spread from where my fingers touched. I could hear them outside the door debating what to do. Then faintly, through the static of the intercom, I heard a voice that wasn't theirs. "Nash, return to the source." Handler's voice, but layered beneath it, another one, deeper, echoing through my bones. Phase 2 begins when the warmth is lost again. The temperature dropped another 10 degrees. The aurora now covered the entire sky. By the third night, the world map on the bridge had frozen in place. Every coastline glowed faintly blue. Every ocean trench pulsed like a heartbeat. The Arctic had expanded southward, devouring the northern hemisphere. The captain came to see me one last time. He looked old, frost clinging to his eyelashes. "You did this, didn't you?" he said softly. I shook my head. No, I remembered it. He stared for a long moment, then handed me a flare gun. "End it," he said, "before it spreads further." I took it, but when he walked away, I realized there was nothing left to end. The warmth was already gone. When the aurora reached the equator, every ocean turned reflective. The satellites stopped transmitting. The world went silent. I stood on the deck, the last man breathing warm air, watching the frozen sky shimmer above the still sea. And then, beneath the surface, I saw them again, countless silhouettes, rising slowly, not hostile, not human, just returning. The frost spread up my arms, and I didn't resist it, because for the first time I understood what Project Frostbite really was. They hadn't been trying to contain an organism. They'd been trying to preserve a memory of life itself, something older than humanity, something that wanted to wake when the world grew cold again. And now it had. The last thing I remember was whispering to the ice, feeling the hum of the sea answer back. The warmth remembers you. And then the world went still, and somewhere deep beneath the frozen water, something opened its eyes. Years later, long after the last transmission, explorers would find the Resolute frozen in place off the coast of Alaska, its crew preserved perfectly in the ice, all except one room. Inside the quarantine bay, the frost was melted, and the glass walls were breathing.